My name is Christina Jansen. You're here to listen to Mark Hearld. You're surrounded by Mark Hearld. This is, we've been showing Mark's work for 10 years. So we started off with Mark Hearld and friends, and actually every object is a friend of Mark, because Mark has chosen all the other work that goes with the work. And so Mark's come up from York this morning for us, so we're very, very glad to have him here. Studied at Glasgow School of Art, Royal College of Art, so you seem to have spread the entire country. You taught everywhere as well, and I thought that you might want to start with your background, and also why it's so wonderful to have a studio life for your exhibition.
So, well, I grew up in York, and obviously my two real interests were making things and the natural world, and I think they always ran fully in tandem. So very often I try to shake off the animals and do something different, but it's almost impossible because the subject matter really does run completely deep, and it's what I've always drawn, even when I was a child. So at Glasgow School of Art, I was lucky enough to have been taught by Mick Manning, who in many ways was a complex man and a tough taskmaster, but a very good teacher. And he also shared my love of nature and pushed me in that direction, which was really good. And then from there I went to the Royal College of Art and I did a natural history illustration MA, and I didn't do it in a scientific way, but just in a romantic way. But the tutor that I was taught by was a man called John Morris Wood. He also taught Mick Manning, but he was a friend of Edward Borden and had worked in Edward Borden's studio, and he used to go to summer workshops in Benton End with Cedric Morris, and he was also taught by John Minton. So what was great about that lineage was I was very, very inspired by British 20th century art, and so my own sort of natural curiosity for that period of work was aided by having people who actually knew these people, so it filtered down. I also was very, very lucky when I was on Art Foundation in York to meet a chap called John Hutchinson, who was an architectural historian, architect and artist, and he really took me up here under his wing and showed me lots of visual things. And he had a collection of John Pipers, which I saw close to. So all of that sort of thing filtered in. The really surprising thing in a way was that I'd never done collage at all at art school, and I had a sort of epiphany moment in probably about the first or second year after graduating, where I literally just cut out, I felt like I was working in a background and I sort of lost control of it in a way, and I cut a shape and offered the shape up, and the graphic quality of the introduction of that shape just was a sort of light switch on moment. And I realised that was my medium straight away. Something about the heart, the edges that are dynamic and abstract in and of themselves, and they can contain expressive marks, and they act as a foil for expression. And I just also found the way that one could bring things together, like disparate elements together, very, very satisfying. So I think collage, I get frustrated when people sort of lazily term me a printmaker, because I've never really been a printmaker. If I'm anything, I'm a collagist, and my attitude to print, is very much to do with collage, and that's really, I think, the thing the umbrella approach that's how I think really creatively. So much so actually that a friend of mine who edits Cambridge Literary Review was doing an issue on manifestos, and she said, "Mark, can you write me a manifesto?" And I said, "I don't really know what I can say. I could write you a collage manifesto." So I do have a collage manifesto, which I could actually whip, and I might do in a minute. I might whip out just to keep Jonathan Gibbs awake, and I might just whip that out so he can see if he agrees with. So that was quite interesting. So I've thought a lot about collage, and the majority of the work that I've done for this exhibition is collage, although some of it is very, very cut papery, like that one, and some of it is also quite painterly, like that one. And I definitely have, I'll never give up the collage, but I've definitely also been embracing the paint a lot more because I enjoy that.
But it is a great studio life that you have. I mean, we've got some fabric here. I mean, we're surrounded by Mark Hearld. I mean, you're a great, fantastic collaborator.
Yes.
And I've always wanted to know when you developed your own typeface and so on. I mean, was that as a child and so on? Because everything, you've got all these original works of art, but there is this umbrella of all these other lovely things that you do that people can get into Mark Hearld through your books or illustrations or fabrics.
Yeah.
And so on.
Well, I think that's going back to this chap, John Hutchinson.
Yeah.
He was somebody, who showed me a visual way of life.
Yeah.
So his interests in the visual world were from, the pots that he ate off to what he collected, and that really chimed a chord. So I've always been interested in, everything visual, really. So there's no need to have anything that doesn't look good or that doesn't make you feel excited. Why? Because you can usually get that. So I think I've always been very, very interested in design as well, because I love objects and I love things, and I have a curiosity for that. And I feel like the way that I've worked with other people has enabled me to flex my muscles and collaborate, as you say. So if we talk about the ceramics, for example, in this exhibition, I've worked with a production potter in Stoke-on-Trent, and he basically had most of his career as a sort of manager in the big pottery works like Dalton and Leeds Pottery, where he oversaw lots of technological and almost engineering type ceramic conundrums, which means that actually working with him, he has a great technical facility. So for example, the crazy kitten plate, the cat plate, is black basalt. So that's a stoneware clay with cobalt oxide in it that makes it black, and it's got stoneware clay and also porcelain clay slip on it. And so that's a very traditional Stoke, that stems back to the jasperware of Wedgwood. So obviously I wouldn't have been able to do that, but I worked with somebody who can, and that's wonderful. And he basically, each one of the platters is slip cast. So I arrive at the pottery, I arrive at the station in Stoke-on-Trent, get picked up by him, and then there's under 6 towels, there are plates in plaster moulds ready for me to go. And first of all, we turn them and I decorate the backs, and then I do them one after another, and I work all day until like 4:30, 4:45, then I get dropped off back at the station, and it's a really fantastic thing. But again, you can't be an expert in everything, so I've always seen collaboration as a wonderful thing, because it gives you can use somebody else's skill and enthusiasm, and that also really reinvigorates your own creative.
But it's a lovely limited palette though, and it's different from before.
Other things.
And then the collage feeds into the plates.
Yeah.
And so on as well.
So
are you just doing that spontaneously, or had you drawn out what you were going to do?
No. So what I did was I arrived there, and then I go round the corner to the shop and buy this terrible paper called something like the Standard or the Herald or the something, and it's some sort of Stoke-on-Trent paper that costs me 80p. And I have a pair of scissors in a drawer. I take a sort of a permanent marker
Yeah.
and scribble an owl shape on a bit of newspaper and then snip it out carefully. And sometimes, like with those birds, I'll have a piece of paper as a folded sheet, so I get 2 owls for the price of 1. And then I've got the owls and a pair. And then what I do is I work in layering. So this is where printmaking, collage and ceramic all connect those thought processes, because you think in a layered way. So that those owl plates, they're on a white body, and then I've taken terracotta decorating slip and made expressive marks over them. Then I've taken black decorating slip and made expressive marks on. Then I put a piece of newspaper, an owl-shaped piece of newspaper on, sprayed it so that it goes absolutely flat. Then I took a big mop brush with white slip, put white slip over the top, and then peel off the owl, exposing the expressive, and then, to use the technical terminology, a scribing tool, one can sgraffito through and reveal the white body and get a lovely linear quality. Now, obviously, these are in the tradition of the Picassiettes, who were a set of potters that rejected all of Leach's, earnest brown wares and images of wheat sheaves and that sort of thing, and thought, what Pablo's doing is far more exciting. And so there were people like Nicholas Vergette, Margaret Hind, William Newland, who were all doing these plates, and I found that work very inspiring as well. So that's the tradition of the plates. But I have also done proper slipware with Terry, Terry Shane, in a much simpler way, with just a red body, white slip, and an iron glaze, and I absolutely love doing that, and I would like to do more of that, which is why it's so wonderful to be shown with Clive Bowen, whose work I absolutely admire and love. Yeah.
I think everyone should know that you've got an amazing ceramic collection.
Yeah. So I have. So I bought. The thing is, I've bought ceramics because you can get really great ceramics by the best of the best at an affordable price, really, which is good. So I've got a few good things, and yeah, that's been really nice. But it's a bit like so it's a bit like the textiles with the ceramics. It was always an enthusiasm on the side, but that I took seriously, and then it became something that I found my way into being able to do a bit. But I've never called myself a potter as such. I would always say that I'm interested in ceramics and pottery, and I collaborate with.
It was the first thing that we showed.
Yeah. And Christina sort of mentioned this, and I think it's fun that we did this. So Christina knows that I do enjoy designing things. So actually, she had the idea of designing something that I could take away, and gave me another brochure that had quite an interesting format, which was really good because it offered up potential and possibilities. And then that meant that by thinking about this as an overall thing that people would, it actually almost determined the scale of the artworks. So I ended up doing the miniatures and things for particular sizes. And again, I enjoyed that because it just makes you do things a little bit differently to how you ordinarily would. And I find in general, the mixture of doing design projects and fine art, straight collages is a really good one, because I think you think slightly differently when you're doing a design project, or it just, maybe there's a slightly more of a particular constraint which makes you do something differently, and I think again that feeds into your ordinary process. So I think doing a range of things in your practice really enriches and makes it exciting, and also you feel confident to attempt other things because you've done that before, and I think that's also really good. And I absolutely relish the idea of designing something or trying something different. Very good. It's good fun.
How did this come about?
So,
That's fantastic.
So a little while ago, I did a cover for Ted Hughes' selection of poems by Simon Armitage, and Johnny also did some poems for Faber. I think we worked for the same designer. I think it was Eleanor Crowe, or no, actually it was somebody else. But anyway, this format.
It was Miriam Rosenblum.
Spot on, it was Miriam Rosenblum. You're right. You're right. And basically, that set of books was a real success. And Ted Hughes did a number of collections of poems for younger readers.
Yeah.
What was absolutely spectacularly good luck for me is that when I was 18, I got given a large format edition of this very text with the most stunning monotype illustrations by somebody called R.J. Lloyd. And his formalizations of creatures were probably some of the most formative drawings, that I saw, because he had a way of making the animals very animally and live, but they were formalized and they were designed and they occupied the page in a very dynamic way. Hugely inspirational. So then to be asked to do a reissue of that in a different format, it was the perfect text. And then just to add another sort of strand of strange magic to the whole thing, I was at a little gallery in York and I saw a slipware pot on a shelf that was for sale, and it had the word Midsummer on it. And it was somewhere between a sort of Fishley's of Fremlington harvest jug and an Amiga workshop type vessel. And when I picked it up, I saw the name R.J. Lloyd at the bottom. And then I suddenly remembered that R.J. Lloyd, who'd done the first illustrations for this, had done a bit of pottery. So I bought this pot, and I was literally had this project on my desk at the time, got it, took it home, and then did a bit of research, and then found out that he was a collector of historic North Devon slipware. So later in the summer, after I'd finished doing this, I went to the Burton Gallery in Bideford, where his collection of traditional slipware was, and met the director and had a chat. And actually, R.J. Lloyd is still alive, and I do have his address somewhere, so I should write him. But going back to this, I suppose I thought, well, there is a cockerel in it. I thought the shape, I wanted to do something that would be bold and graphic and really hold the eye. And I used some really, really beautiful ink called, Cornelison's French sepia ink, which has got a lot of shellac in it, as you can see in that cat. And I made a drawing and then added colour to it. I suppose you could probably see the influence of somebody like 60s Brian Wildsmith in it. And I was sort of maybe in the back of my mind thinking of the sort of golden age of English book illustration when I did it. And it was a real joy to do it. And now it's just come out earlier in January. So yeah, and it's nice. So that's that. So and I think you can probably see that in a way there's similar sort of
Distinctive
colour. There's a rich colour, zinging colour palette. And I'm very much thinking it's for children. So I went particularly high with the colour, knowing that in the reproduction process the colour might come down a little bit. So you always go bolder and brighter because it's you don't want a sort of apologetic, gloomy looking reproduction.
And so when you're working on a palette for this, for example,
Yes.
I mean, are you working with St Jude's, or are you doing the design and letting them make the colour decisions?
I usually make 2 or 3 colour decisions,
Yeah.
but actually this very beautiful colour wasn't by me. Kate at St Jude's did it, but I absolutely adore I love this colour
Yeah,
combination.
I think
It's absolutely gorgeous. I think actually colour becomes more and more important in my work. Actually, it's almost the main thing I think about, probably. But I think with textiles, I almost could do to be, I sort of think of it in one, and I really need to spend a bit of time really thinking about a colour palette, because absolutely adore colour and the subtleties of colour.
What's the difference though between making a lithograph,
Yes,
a composition for a multiple edition print,
yeah.
and doing this? What's the difference in that discipline?
Well, I suppose in a way, doing a two colour lino and a lithograph are closer than maybe doing a collage,
Yeah.
because they both basically involve separations. So with a lithograph, you've just got lots more separations, and that is a very technical process. And when I used to work at the Kirwin, I did work with good technicians who were amazing at the registration, but also, I don't know how I sometimes look back at those, I think I don't know how I did that.
Yeah.
You know, like I did this one Rooster and Railway Carriage, and you know, I've got like chromatic, what I would call a chromatic grey, where you've got 3 different colours coming together to make an envisaged colour. So I've got sort of sky blue, salmon pink, lemon yellow that make an olive green, and somehow I've sort of thought that out in advance.
Yeah.
And I think you can train your mind to do that, but I'm feeling slightly out of practice with that. Although I would like to get back to doing that, because I think, again, the sort of dark arts of colour. The great thing about working with those sorts of lithographic overlays is that if you have a beautiful olive green that's made up of salmon pink, sky blue, and a chalked off lemon, and you have all of those colours sort of separately around that olive green, they speak to the olive green in the most perfect way, and that really is a complete joy. And yeah, you can do a lot with that. So yeah, I always say, I think with colour it's good to begin with quite a limited range of colours and then add, you know, so you get 3 or 4 colours chiming, and then if it needs additional colours you can add them. But I think many people go wrong by just having too many colours too soon, and then they don't make any of the colours talk to each other, and it feels like incoherent in a colour way. Sometimes you just do get a combination of colours that oughtn't to work, like for example that ointment pink and with those orange spots on, which is kind of surprising and quite frankly a bit bonkers on those trees. But for me, there's something satisfying about it, and it does work. Yeah.
I'm going to get you some water.
That's fine.
And
Any questions?
well, yes, questions, and then I wanted to continue taking
People round.
because a lot of people haven't. We've had to tell everyone everything that's here has been chosen downstairs by Mark. It's all part of his kind of gathering of artists,
Yes.
and your love of other art forms, and it all speaks to one another.
Yeah. So I
as
could
well.
mention something about that.
Yeah. So,
Everything useful that I've learned, I've taught myself. That sounds arrogant, but I do think that.
you've got to learn.
I do really feel like when I was just doing it for myself, the 5 years, maybe the first 5 years after art college, when I was doing it because I wanted to do it, that was when I made the discoveries and I made the leap forward, because almost I was pleasing myself and being my own best critic. I mean, I have to say I was hugely diligent at looking at other artists' work, and I always say, to students that the way to be the most yourself is to really cast the net wide with inspiration, and don't look left and right, but remember that you can look back to the cave paintings of Lascaux to make a contemporary statement, and that's so important. And I think if you I literally worked through the Glasgow School of Art library. I'd literally just go in, work along the shelves, take every book off, see what was interesting. And I think that's also the thing with applied arts and textiles, that I became interested in, even though I thought, it's somebody else's thing, but I'd actually accrued quite a lot of knowledge about it without even really realising, just from being interested. So, yeah, that's what I would say about that.
And so you did the lumber room project at York, which ended 2 years ago now?
Yes.
And you were let loose in their collection. You were allowed to do anything you wanted,
Yes.
which was a fabulous exhibition.
Yes.
It's kind of made you, there's still bits of you in York Museum that you're sort of permanently in there.
Yeah.
Is there any other projects like that that are coming up? Or
Well, nothing's immediately coming up, but I also, on the back of that, I did get to do Compton Verney.
yeah,
So, Compton Verney, I got to re-display the British folk art collection at Compton Verney, which was a dream job. And that was interesting in that it was a collection of folk art put together by an art dealer called Andrus Kalman, who ran Crane Kalman Gallery in Knightsbridge. So he was a dealer in modernist British painting. People like Ben Nicholson, Lowry, Sutherland, Winifred Nicholson, Mary Newcomb. So it was very interesting that he also collected folk art because you could see, I'm very interested in because his collection of folk art was through the eyes of an art dealer rather than a social historian, which is often the case. So it was lovely to have that very visual collection to re-display, and it had been presented up until I got my hands on it as a reserve collection on a really unforgiving mesh wall that was brutal and pretty horrible. So what I wanted to do was create spaces where the work could be grouped so that you would actually be able to go and look at the pictures. And actually it was great because members of staff said I didn't even realise this picture was in the collection because they hadn't seen it, because it had been just so commodified on this awful mesh panel. So that was really interesting. And I think there we can use the analogy of collage again, in that basically I was collaging in three-dimensional space with objects, and I definitely think in that way. So I think it's just about finding relationships and groupings with things. And so I did that, but I really very much enjoyed doing that. I think the next big thing is going to be another visitor centre exhibition at Yorkshire Sculpture Park, which is going to happen in 2020. But I haven't got anything curatorial lined up as yet, although I would enjoy the opportunity to do something else in that vein, because it's a different discipline and one that makes me think again in a different way, but very rewarding.
Is there any other questions, or shall we attempt to sort of have a walk through so that you can kind of give us a curated guide of your work and of everything else that's there? Is there any other questions just now, just before we walk through? What's your question?
I wanted to ask Mark how he finds the students of today, given that when we studied the digital technology didn't really exist, and students today have a far different reference. Reference. I wonder how you, because you're such a hand and eye person, it seems to me, so tactile.
Well, I've been very, very lucky, I have to say. I mean, I haven't taught this year, but I have always taught on the foundation up until a year ago. And I would say that getting students at the age of 18, they're still malleable enough for you to evangelise about the joys of materials. And I definitely have done that, and I have been very lucky to have some amazing students. But as you well know, Johnny, they come in all shapes and sizes. But I definitely wouldn't say that people that people are so technological that they're not interested in materials. Perhaps some are a little tentative with materials at first, but I think in the teaching, if you encourage them to move the hands and explore, it's amazing how quickly they get the feel for that. So I think one of the things that I would always say is there's so much emphasis on the idea and the lightning flash. Students sit there thinking, I've got to wait for the idea. They're paralysed. Where I say, don't worry about ideas. Move your hands. Ideas come at the pit face. And basically, what I would encourage them is to just make something, do something, make a mark, and actually by doing that, so my teaching process is all about exploration through gesture, movement, looking, just being playful, and then if people go in that way, they're more uninhibited, and that's when exciting things start to happen.
Perhaps you could just jot that down, Mark. Thank you very much. That's a great answer. Thank you.
But saying that,
Yes.
you use Instagram the same way that you use your pen.
Indeed.
I mean, it's another tool.
And I absolutely agree. And if I was more digitally literate, I would be even more versatile in design. And I think as a formatting tool, it is amazing.
Yeah.
And I also, to pick up on the whole scrapbook thing, Instagram for me is a digital scrapbook. And I have to say that it really does. I find it a very creative thing. It enables me to minute the things that I notice. It enables me to share things that I feel passionate about. I actually enjoy going to an exhibition and maybe choosing 3 things that particularly say it for my feed, because it enables me to just have a kind of aid memoir to the whole experience, and also it allows me to look back and to see what I was thinking about, or what I was looking at, or to notice that I did that collage on that day and then I saw this and that. So I think that's very, very a wonderful and powerful thing. So I think technology really has its creative place, and I think it's like anything. If you use any approach well, it will be good,
And this exhibition is unbelievably unique in comparison to your studio, which we got a huge amount of feedback on. Wondering how on earth you made working amongst that mess.
Well, I have to say that I'm a sociable animal, and the reason that I have a shared studio is because I like working with other people. And I do have half of a room that's about this size, or maybe not quite as wide as this, but about this sort of size.
Yeah.
And I could absolutely work in that bit, but that room is called the cottage actually, and it was basically we've got the ground floor of an 18th century, what was a print workshop, and this cottage bit is a slightly separate bit, and that's where I've got the biggest space. But actually I don't work in my space, I work on the communal table, because I actually prefer the feeling of being in the centre of the room where I can be involved in the whole. If I'm in my own little cottage bit, I feel like, oh my goodness, everything's happening elsewhere. That said, I can perfectly well work there, and if I'm not at my communal table, people say, oh well, very quiet, are you not coming in here to work on it? So I sort of drifted in there, but I always feel slightly guilty. And actually, the bit that had my bike in, doesn't usually have my bike in, but it does, but it is actually a repository for materials, and like Picasso said, all the art is on the floor, and basically it's very good to have strewn bits of coloured paper, so if you're at a loss for what to do, you can just, like a magpie, walk into the space, see a sparkling object, pick it up, and that can be the starting point. He said, waxing lyrical in a kind of self-mythologization, but it really is true that actually, if you can look around and see things, you've started already.
Yes.
So having materials around and about means that the starting process is much more straightforward. And if I'm really, really short of ideas, one of the things I might do is mix up some flour and water paste, 1 part water, 1 part flour, 6.5 parts water, bring it to the boil, squirt pigment, acrylic into those, have different pots, and then paint out, 60 sheets of beautiful coloured papers in related tones. So then I've got like a whole palette of beautiful papers, and then if I felt uninspired at that point, just choosing colours, by the time you've done that, a whole range of new images are offered up just by mixing colours and painting them out. in fact I need to do that right now because I'm running low because I keep giving away my bits of paper. When I do a collage workshop, I always take a selection of my own papers and let people have a little rifle around to engender good behaviour and work out how they can be a collage artist themselves. But actually now I feel like I really need to make some more exciting papers.
Is it always acrylic when you use as colour?
I use acrylic, gouache, watercolour, these wonderful German drawing inks called Rohrer's inks, Cornelissen's French sepia ink, Indian ink, emulsion paint,
Can I ask about the flour and water in acrylic? Is that just to get rid of the sort of plasticky feel, or?
No, so what it does is it's a traditional process that bookbinders use to make decorative papers, and they would use up their flour and water bookbinding paste that was left over. And basically what it does is it slows the drying time, and it means that the paint holds its almost like a sculptural form and then dries slowly, so you can get wonderful scratched marks in it. And basically they use paper, card combs or metal combs, their finger, to create patterns in a decorative way. But it allows you to get these wonderful textural surfaces. As you can see there, there's one, there's a bit of, and here I've actually used paste over a piece of printed paper, and that is in itself an 18th century way of using up waste paper, because in the 18th century there was a lot of waste in the printing industry. So what would happen is that bookbinders and book producers would use up waste paper that was misprinted with either marbling over the top or paste. It's called over marbling or over pasting, and so that they would put a pattern onto discarded, and actually that is following in that tradition. But that's a whole book arts. That's another bit of applied art thing. Yeah, like bookbinding and all of that sort of thing.